Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Ocean Rockstars podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, Lorin Bice. Lorin has over 7 years of experience as a KDAC, certified addiction counselor, and she's been in the field for over 7 years. I believe she's been sober for over 8 years. She has a tremendous wealth of knowledge about how to work with clients and work with families dealing with addiction issues and also co-occurring mental health issues. We're very lucky to have you here today, and we're looking forward to speaking about these topics.
Awesome. Thank
you. Hi,
you.
Lorin.
Hi.
We've known each other for a couple of years as well. She's worked for a few of our programs, and I can personally just say that all the clients really love working with Lorin. Lorin, tell us a little bit about yourself, just your background, how you got into this field.
Yeah, so I got sober 9/18/2015, and I kind of got into the field through my own experience, right? So my story kind of started off with me, having that unhealthy coping skill and just kind of being a little wild and really spiritually sick is the root of it. And when I ended up getting sober, I actually found a place called Providence, and they were a faith-based treatment center. And in that, I learned a lot. It was one of those aspects of treatment where I'm not sure how many of them still exist. I know Providence isn't still actively working with clients. And it was a very secluded place. So it was really nice because in my experience, I got to live on a ranch with a bunch of animals.
Nice.
And we didn't have phones, we didn't have TVs, we didn't have like radios or anything like that. It was really a really nice place for you to take away and remove all of the distractions and really understand yourself and learn more about the Bible, learn more about God, and waking up every morning doing Proverbs, ending the night in a group conscious of us talking about the ways in which we can experience unconditional love. And so really about me has so much to do with that foundation of my recovery, was this willingness that I was willing to do in order to get clean.
Right.
And in that, I met people that showed me unconditional love. So my counselor, shout out to Dave, he gave me so much unconditional love and provided me trust. And oftentimes when we look at the things that are going to help us get clean, we have to also look at the people that are willing to demonstrate a trusting relationship that allows you to expose yourself in a way that allows you to see yourself just as you are. And oftentimes that can be a very painful experience and lead us back into using because maybe we are worried about judgment or we're worried that we're not enough, or all of the cognitive distortions that kind of play in our mind that keep us further and further from the understanding that right here in this moment, if I can be present, I can change.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so it was really a fascinating time because it was just that opportunity for me to understand unconditional love. And with that unconditional love and with that trust, I was slowly able to dispel kind of the ways in which I ultimately found myself being trapped in addiction. And kindly and gently having that mentor that would coach me through some really challenging times gave me this huge amount of inspiration that I could be anything.
Yes.
And the person that I wanted to be the most was just like Dave.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
He was so cool. Him and his wife, they really showed me that despite me having this spiritual sickness, that I was deserving of love, and that they were going to actually follow through with all of the things that they said and showed me a new way of living. And I wanted to help other people in the way that they showed me. And it wasn't in this monetary way of them helping me. It was in a spiritual way of them helping me. That patience, that firmness, and that willingness to say the things to me that I needed to hear in a very loving way. Yeah. And because of that, I was able to really go up against some very challenging things, legal issues, custody issues, my own type of codependency, family issues, and step by step, he walked me through all of them. And in that, I noticed that there's a theme, and it's having that positive mentor, non-judgmental space that's going to allow you to ultimately, slowly but surely, take the next indicated step. And I loved all of that experience for me, because it was filled, in early recovery, it can be filled with so much love. Right. And I felt like every step of the way that I was getting clean, I was able to fall back in love with myself. And I was able to see my gifts. And all of those gifts were always supported by the people that were in my corner. And they would always celebrate those victories. And I learned that it was really hard for me to celebrate victories. Right. It was really hard because there was... just in general. Oh, okay, yeah. It reminds me of...
You didn't give yourself credit.
Because I guess like we're so loaded with shame. Right. And we're so loaded with insecurity that when we start actually doing the right things in early recovery, it's hard for us to receive. Right. It's when you hear that compliment, it's hard to say even thank you, because you're like, it doesn't resonate, you know? Yeah, and almost... So then what shifted in that way of receiving through that experience? I guess it, like I said, it has to do with that unconditional love. Right. And obviously in unconditional love, there's forgiveness. There's that openness, there's connection. Right. And then no judgment. No judgment. Right. And once again, having those right people in your corner to help you receive that love. And obviously, like, they're in their hearts was so guided by this unconditional love of God and their mission to help other people get better and learn a different way of life. You could just feel that energy. Right. And when it was provided to me, like, you did something good, I believed them. Right. So I just believed them. And they said they're going to do certain things, and they did those things, right? So many people say things and then they don't do what they say, or they don't follow their what they preach, right? But in this case, you found a group of people, specifically Dave and his wife and the program, where, you know, they said, hey, this is how we're going to help you, and then they were there with you. And what I loved about what you said is just one step, because there are so many things, right? Legal, this, custody. But if you think about it all, then it's overwhelming, and that's what people relapse, and that's why people don't even want to get sober, because it's just too daunting, right? Yeah. But then at the end of the day, you break it up one step at a time, and somebody's there, and you kind of surrender to them and say, hey, look, I'm here and to allow you to help me, and then receive that help. That's the two-way relationship where, you know, you ultimately found yourself in, right? Yes, and absolutely. And oftentimes we can become so busy out in that lifestyle of kind of chasing every day in its own kind of quest, right? We can get so busy and caught up in that that cycle that whenever we actually get into a place and we're required to rest and get better and heal, we want to get our nervous system back into that trauma response. Right. And so we find ourselves starting to keep note of all of the things that we need to do, and that list really kind of spins us out and that's where that patience piece comes in. We don't really think of patience as an action.
It's almost like a breakthrough point, right? Where at first you're like, okay, this is nice, and I'm in the somber setting, and but then after a few days, or whether it's a week, everyone, it's different. But at some point you're like, okay, it's actually more stressful to be in this relaxing environment because you're so used to like having all this noise around you, right?
Yeah.
And then that's when you need to kind of break through that period, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, I can relax a little bit.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And more often than not, that is your work. That is your work to do. That's where that spiritual piece comes in.
Right.
Am I going to be okay in this moment today without having all of these things checked off the list?
Right.
And like Dave used to teach us this thing, which was just get your head on the pillow tonight, and then tomorrow we'll talk about it.
Right.
And it always gave us that nice break from not being so emotionally involved in all of this stuff and all of the things, right? And really just take that step back. And because there was that follow through on their part, which is, I'll talk with you about this tomorrow or next Friday or whenever it was, you learned patience.
Right.
And obviously being somebody that was so used to being in control of my emotions because I could have all that freedom. That was a place to where I really had to work on that patience. But in that, it kind of gave me everything that I needed in order to stay clean.
Right. How long were you there for that experience?
So that's a 6-month program.
Okay.
And I think I was there probably 10 months.
Okay.
I really
So you really allowed yourself to be submerged in that experience and get as much as you can out of it.
Yes. Yeah. And they encouraged me to be able to start going to school and really work on myself while I was there. And like I said, everything that they promised to me, they were able to follow through with their... And of course, in my very sick way, I always wanted to try to catch them and not being honest or authentic, because then I would have some excuse to, do whatever I wanted.
They did what they said they were going to do.
They did what they said that they were going to do. I was able to go to school. I went to school to become an addiction counselor, and that was awesome because it was a nice break for me, learning how to balance my time and independence in a healthy way. So like go to school and then come back and be there before curfew and just like kind of like how sober livings are. Right. Very similar situation.
What's interesting is, and you've been in this industry for a while, so you see that, in the case of your program, that was not really, it wasn't like based on insurance. It wasn't based on, it was and it's a religious type of organization. So I don't know exactly what the financial component was, but it seemed like it was viable for you to be able to stay for a longer period of time, right? And then I think what we see a lot of times with, in residential treatment is, especially because the good news is people can afford to go to treatment now because insurance covers treatment. Of course, there's some, out-of-pocket expenses, but at the end of the day, it covers a lot of the treatment, right? And so that's huge. Yeah. But then as insurance goes, they try to truncate the treatment. So, you don't get 6 months of residential authorization, right? You get maybe 2 to 4 weeks. If you're lucky, you get 30 days. And that's really like max authorization, right? A lot of times you see a lot less. But so then it's about creating a program that has that continuum of care and has kind of different levels of care. But what I love about what you said, and really what I actually believe in, is if you do have the ability to go to a longer term program, or if you can kind of get that higher intensity of a program, whether it's detox or high intensity residential, but then eventually find yourself not necessarily in a sober living, but in some type of kind of low intensity residential long-term program where you're going to be there for 6 to 12 months. That's, to me, that's kind of the magic where you can see a lot of change, right? And you can see change in the regular programs as well, but it's just the more time you have in treatment and the more time that you allow yourself to be submerged in that and away from all the distractions and the noise and the drugs and the phones and even but that, and then gradually get back into it, right? get access and be able to function in society, but you still know that you have this group of people who care about you that are there to support you, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's such a unique experience that you had, and I appreciate you for sharing that, you know?
Yeah, I really actually love this idea of that long-term understanding for every individual that's getting better. To recognize that this isn't going to be something that's going to go away overnight.
Right.
Just because we stop using doesn't mean that the problem has diminished.
Right.
We have to continue to work at it, right?
You need that continuum. I mean, that's, you start somewhere, but it takes a while. And it's, I think somebody said this the other day and it just resonated, but it's such an obvious statement, is that you didn't become a, alcoholic or drug addict or, have this addiction overnight, right? Even with mental health, it's not something that just overnight, all of a sudden you have some type of mental health issue, right? It's something that gradually over time, and it's something that took so long to finally get yourself to a place of recovery. And then people think, okay, well, how am I going to get better overnight, right? And there's no magic overnight success stories, right?
No.
It's putting in that work for a period of time, and that's what you experienced at your program. And then, so tell me a little bit about after that. So you were there for about 10 months.
And I went to school, and then I was able to start working for them as I was in school. So just doing things, learning more about the treatment experience, intakes,
right.
Checking in, just the whole thing, being able to be of service in that way, beginning to get my hours, and learning counseling and all the different components of treatment. So within that, I just continued down the path, and then actually they call it bunkies, one of my bunkies in that same treatment center, she ended up getting a job out here in Orange County working for a treatment center, and invited me to come and work over there. And so that was my big jump from Providence into the insurance-based treatment industry.
Right.
And from there, I was able to build myself from the ground up. And I really love what treatment offers as far as it goes with being of service and helping out and getting that start, because there's so many different areas of treatment where you can start out not having a lot of money and work your way up. So I started off as a house manager and worked my way up, throughout the industry. And in that, I learned all the different components of treatment. I finished school, and I started doing case management. And I did case management for about 3 years.
Okay.
But, every time progressing and learning new skills, becoming SMART certified, and taking on different roles within the company, whether that's, the lead case manager, residential management, quality assurance and compliance. I mean,
You've done it all.
I really love learning and trying new things because it allows me to be versatile.
Got it.
And one of the best things about being an addict in recovery is that, we're so talented in so many different areas because we've had to learn all of these skills, these resilient skills, as soon as you start really realizing that we can begin again, like even right now in this moment, you can just learn a new skill if you want. And not having that judgment or having that fear of this is going to overly identify me. And that's the gift of getting clean.
I love that. I mean, I think that you said a couple of things that really resonated, right? One is, you kind of got in, rolled up your sleeves, and you did all these different things. And so that shows you, and that gave you a breadth of experience where, you understand what's going on, if it's an issue at the sober living home or if it's an issue at their own home, their family home, versus what happens in treatment, right? In the actual therapy or in the case management. I mean, there's so many different pieces to the puzzle when it comes to treatment. And I don't think people understand all the different layers to it. It's not as simple as just sitting in front of a group of people and sharing, right? That's part of it, but there's so many different facets to it. And for you to kind of have been in all those different positions. It really gave you the ability to really understand what's going on in the client's life, 24/7, not just whether it's, in their 3-hour outpatient or in their residential, right? So, because there's so many other things that are happening when they're not just in the actual programming component of treatment.
Oh, yeah.
And that's as important as how to manage that as it is the tools that they learn while they're in the program.
Oh, man, absolutely. I mean, there's so many different components of this. And I want to also give the component of the family, too, right? One of the greatest gifts that I got in my years of working in treatment was working and doing the family program.
Right.
I loved that because it was such a challenge for me to take myself out of the picture and really sit and listen to what the families are going through. And it allows me to see things from a different perspective of how we as addicts and alcoholics might not remember all of the stress and trauma and PTSD we gave our families.
Right.
And ultimately, we get so caught up in this idea that my addiction is only really consuming me and only hurting me, that it's so dispelled in that. So humbling whenever you really start working with the family members and seeing all of the stress that it's really put on them emotionally, financially, mentally, within their relationship. Because oftentimes, if you have a loved one that's an addict or an alcoholic, it can put so much stress on your marriage that sometimes the marriage doesn't make it through because you have differencing of opinions on how to manage and get help for your loved one. Yeah,
it's such a complex issue, right? Because there's the client is going, the patient client is going through it, right? And they're not thinking about everyone else at that time. They're just thinking about themselves, right? And then you have the family who is dealing with the pain and the suffering associated with it, but then sometimes they're part of the problem too. And so they need kind of to separately get help.
Absolutely.
Right. And then there's the putting it all together piece where,
course.
You're working with the client, you're working with the family. Now you got to get them all together. Because at the end of the day, the goal is to bring, there's a fracture and there's, this broken environment, and you want to put that together. And so you want to ultimately mend, the bridges and kind of the fences. And I think one of the things that we see, and, based on your experience as well, is that when everyone's willing to put in the effort and the work and stop kind of blaming each other, and also kind of move past that feeling of guilt and and blame, right? Because it's very easy to be like, as the family or as the parents, to feel very guilty. Like, what did, we did something wrong, right? And then it's also very easy to feel angry because you're angry at this person because you gave them all this love and support or whatever it is. And it's all different. It's case by case. But I think the common denominator, whatever the issue is that there is an opportunity for healing.
Yes.
Right? As long as everyone's willing to put in the time and the effort. And so one thing I was going to ask you is, in working with families, what is the strategies and kind of the tools and coping mechanisms that you teach them to kind of break the bad habits that they have, and in order to create new, more positive habits, to create an environment in which that client can maintain sobriety?
Wow, that's a great question, and I love this topic. So boundaries is the simple one, but it's different for every family, because really the idea is what the family member is recognizing as their portion of the problem, and getting denial to be resolved just like it is for the addict and alcoholic. It also requires that for the parent. And one of the things that you often see so much is the worry that comes of the fear of losing your child to, death. Obviously, one of the known outcomes of addiction is fatality. It's death. And so because of that worry that happens, you notice the family wanting to catch their loved one before they fall, right?
Right.
And so the way that is kind of like the metaphor that I like to use, oftentimes family members can get in the habit of like running around with a pillow to like catch them, you know, before they fall.
Right.
And in that, once the addict ultimately steps back and no longer needs that cushion, you recognize that there's still a parent whose role now is not being fulfilled.
Right.
And it's really hard in order to take that step back and say, I have to believe that they can do this on their own. And in that, what would that look like in order to really help them believe in themselves? Because if I tell my loved one subconsciously, or maybe even over the phone, oh, you need me to buy you a pack of cigarettes.
Right.
Here you go.
Right.
Are you really telling them that you believe that they can get a job and earn their own cigarettes?
Right.
Or are you really, and that's a very small,
it's just one example.
One example.
Yeah.
But the idea is empowerment.
Right. Right.
How can I empower my loved one and continue to show up and give them the love and support they need without taking away from them their ability to learn that skill on their own?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's
that's huge.
Yeah, it's a great and a humbling experience.
I think one thing that you see sometimes though is it just takes a lot of coaching to that family member to get them to a place where they can break those habits, right? And I think that's just ultimately what you need to do in that environment of recovery when you're working with the families and with the clients is that just give it time.
Empowerment.
Because, you know, if you try to rush it, then everyone might not be ready. So you have to work with everyone separately. But at the end of the day, I think what you said is that empowerment and giving them kind of the support, but also the freedom and the ability to make it on their own.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge, right? It's always a challenge to find that balance.
Yeah, and that's what working with that family member is like, because oftentimes you'll need to ask them about their decisions.
Right.
What is leading you in order to want to support them in this way?
Right.
And most of the time it's that fear.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of times, and I think all parents are guilty of this, but in a very innocent, positive way, is that it doesn't even matter if we're talking about addiction or mental health, even if it's with their homework or whatever it is.
Totally.
It's, you know, you want to help them and you want them to figure it out, but then sometimes you feel like you need to kind of step in and kind of do it for them and show them, right? And so that's the balance of also, you know, how do you let them fail? Because sometimes you don't want your kids to fail, right? So like you try to do everything you can to prevent them from failing, and sometimes you might need to let them fail in like small increments. You know, I always think about it is like, what are things you could do maybe to prevent some of these bigger issues? Is that even when you're not there and they're just young kids, it's like it's okay to let them fail in small increments and kind of teach them what that feels like. Because I think as a society we're so afraid to fail and we're so like fixated on success and like this definition of success that doesn't include failure, but failure is part of success. You know, I think anyone who's really successful understands that failure is part of success, you know?
Yeah. And there's also the component, which is success is just as dangerous as failure.
Right.
And having that experience of learning that really we can overly expect results. And that can be stressful to our loved one, just as much as fearing that they're not going to get it. So really defining where that pressure is has to do with recognizing the importance of that journey.
Right.
And oftentimes it's
kind of meeting them where they're at.
Just right here in the present moment, in this moment.
Exactly.
And I think we can, as parents, I think we can easily say, yeah, we want to see them succeed. We want to see them succeed. And often that energy that we have that lives within us gets shows up in those conversations.
Right.
And when that energy shows up into that conversation, and your loved one who's still learning more about themselves and is still uncertain about how to cope with difficult situations, can put a little pressure on them.
Mm-hmm.
So really, that's where that ability to manage yourself and to allow them to start taking this journey and really having those conversations with your clinical team
mm-hmm.
in order to find out how it's working.
Right. Yeah. No, I think, that challenge of kind of accepting yourself and then also kind of being in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people, they think that, okay, if I want to change, I have to change my core self. And that's not true, right? And like in my experience and what we've seen is that you can't necessarily change your core self, but it's, okay, well, I might have and everyone's different, but like somebody might be somebody who might have a little bit of a temper, right? Or,
mm-hmm.
In the moment something happens and they get angry, right? So you can't necessarily change what happens in that moment because a lot of that is kind of involuntary.
Yeah.
But then what you can change and the tools that you can learn is, well, what do you do right after that? Because then you can be like, actually see, okay, I just yelled or I just got angry or got upset. I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to calm myself down and then I'm going to revisit this issue.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that can be trained and can be taught and can be a skill that's developed through practice. So, whatever the damage from that moment is, you can easily kind of mitigate that and move forward. Versus, I think some people have this mistaken like ideology that I'm just going to change who I am. And I think that's where you hit a roadblock, is because that's an unrealistic expectation. Like you can be happy, successful, you could be sober, you could be, dealing with your mental health issues. You can lead a very positive life and still have flaws, and I think that's where you start accepting those flaws and learning how to navigate around them rather than just trying to eliminate everything, right?
Yeah. And I can go back into a time where I definitely thought that was a part of getting sober.
Right.
Was this part where I couldn't ultimately be my authentic self.
Right.
And that's not true, because we are going to be humans making mistakes all the time. There is no award for the perfect person at the end of this, right? We're going to be being flexible, but being authentic with yourself. And most of the time, authenticity means that ability in order to not take yourself so seriously all the time.
That's
so
huge.
If I say something to you that maybe was out of line or incorrect, I think the easiest corrected action would be to be like, hey, you know what? I apologize for that, or, help me understand what you were saying earlier. I think I jumped to a bit of conclusions.
Right.
And in that, you start really opening yourself up to a new way of living. But yeah, when it comes to learning and having that resilience for yourself and recognizing I'm still me, and I love me.
Right. Accepting that, yeah.
And accepting that. And I loved me even when I was making my mistakes. I still loved me then.
And kind of forgiving yourself as well.
Every part of me deserves love.
Right.
Every part. Good, bad, or indifferent. And it's given yourself that ability in order to forgive, move on, apologize, create healthy conflict resolution. And, even as addicts and alcoholics, we oftentimes get our own reality distorted, right? So I can be really frustrated and upset in early recovery over the things that happened while I was in active addiction.
Right.
But ultimately, there was so much of my active addiction that I can't remember.
Right.
And I'm getting the story wrong.
From other people.
Right? So I can be really upset
right.
over something that maybe didn't happen like that.
Right. You just got to move forward.
Yeah,
right.
And so ultimately not taking yourself so seriously, knowing that memory loss is just a part of it.
That's true.
And if you can just give yourself that, not taking yourself so seriously and being like, well, there's probably a lot of things that I'm misremembering.
That's a great attitude to have. I think that's part of, that positive outlook is just don't take yourself so seriously.
Don't take yourself so seriously. It's one of the 4 agreements. It's a good one. Right.
I want to, first of all, I just to, this has been a great conversation. I feel like your energy and you bring this kind of peaceful energy.
Oh, thank you.
And I can, I know you work with a lot of our clients, and I know that a lot of them really appreciate working with you. And, you know, you and I have known each other for a couple of years, but we haven't had this kind of in-depth conversation. And I can tell you that I feel that energy too. And I feel kind of, I'm like, I don't think Cole's here, you know, they shoot the podcast, and I don't think they've seen me this relaxed. So I think that's such an important skill, and your ability to communicate that. So I just want to just acknowledge that, you know.
Oh, I really appreciate that. And, you know, I really hope I've always, not always, because I was okay with being spicy before, right?
I can see there's some spice there.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. There is. Yeah, light and dark, you know?
Yeah.
We all exist, and that's
every
all
time
right.
I see your hair color is different.
Yes.
So there you go.
Absolutely. Don't take yourself so seriously.
Right.
You know, just know at any given time, you can choose to try something different.
Got it.
You can always change. And that's one of those places in which I always give a lot of credit to our clients, because they're also my biggest teachers.
Right.
And in that, and to speak to what and how I've been the most useful, I think, working with you is working with the clients and doing guided meditation, Reiki, sound healing, breath work. And I want to acknowledge that what you said about my energy, because that's something that is a gift.
Yeah.
It's a gift of doing that daily discipline, learning how to quiet that storm inside of that rages in us, actually, right? But being okay with it. Oftentimes we
teaching the clients to be okay with it.
And teaching the clients to be okay with it.
Yeah.
You know, I think I look forward to my job. Not a lot of people can say that.
Right.
And the clients know that too.
Yeah.
They know
it comes
I
across.
love
Yeah,
them.
for sure.
We have such a great time exploring what it feels like in order to sit with ourselves.
Okay.
And not being judgmental over that space. And I'll give some really fun examples. You know, we can close our eyes and try to just focus on our breathing. And you can try to do that for like 5 minutes. And you'll notice just in that easy. 5 minutes, you've opened your eyes, you've had a million thoughts, you've told yourself you couldn't do it, you've just done all of these things, like all this mental gymnastics, all these thoughts that go by. And my greatest gifts that I get is to watch people, and I can get emotional about this because it's really amazing, to watch the wonderful clients that we have come in within 7 days of them getting clean. They can sit in meditation for 45 minutes.
Right. That's huge.
Huge.
That's huge.
And teaching them that skill in order to sit, be observing, allowing that connection. Because I believe that addiction is a spiritual sickness more than it is anything else. Really, what we were looking for in active addiction was connection to God.
Right.
To spirit, however, whatever your higher power is, right? But we were looking for that connection, and we were getting an altered state of consciousness. So what we were getting was what we were hoping to be a spiritual experience in numbing ourselves or tuning out or trying to cope, trying to receive unconditional love and not using. Right. And what we were looking for was the real deal. Right.
And you're just looking in the wrong direction.
Yes. It's right here in this moment, in actually right now in this present moment.
Yes.
You can feel God. If you just take that opportunity to appreciate everything that's around you, appreciate the energy, and allow yourself to receive that love. You know, and when we start recognizing where we need to get back to being spiritually awake, we get those opportunities that I get to work with the clients and doing that all the time. And you will see excitement and joy that comes out of them, because for the first time, they're able to feel the feeling that they were seeking in active addiction.
Yes.
And it's so, you know, it's one of those things, like if you blink, you could miss it, because we want it to be something else. We want it to be, there's got to be another reason that I was looking for, right? That quest for this thing.
Right.
But really, when you talk to the clients, and the reason why there's so many positive feedbacks coming is because they're like, nope, this is the real deal.
Right.
This is exactly what it was that I was looking for.
And they finally find it.
I found connection. I learned how to sit with myself. There's, if you don't mind me sharing the story.
Go ahead.
There is a story of a little boy that wants to be a ninja. And I'm going to try to say this in fewer words than what I would normally tell our clients. But I'll share this on the podcast because this is one of the client's favorite stories.
Okay.
So they'll
let's hear it. Let's hear it.
So there's a little boy that wants to be a ninja. And he tells his mom, take me to the dojo. I want to go be a ninja. And so she takes him there, and he's very excited. He sees everybody inside of the building, and they're doing flips and kicks and really showing off all of their talents. And really, it's amazing because he's this little boy in this big room, and he's seeing all of these great masters and great leaders doing all of these really difficult things that he's always dreamed he could do. So his eyes are huge. He's like, oh my gosh, that's going to be me. And the mom drops him off, and he says, okay, I'm ready to be a ninja. And the master says, Wusa, sit here. And so the little boy has to sit on the mat. And he's like, sit here and meditate. So the little boy's like, okay. And of course, he sits down, and he closes his eyes and thinking that he's meditating, and then he gives a little peek, and he just can't help but watch all the stuff going on around him, all the cool stuff. And so he leaves, and he feels kind of fulfilled because he's thinking he's on the road. So day in and day out, he does the same thing. He tells the master, I'm ready. Master tells him, Wusa, sit here and meditate. And this is the same thing that goes on until finally the little boy feels frustrated.
Right.
He feels frustrated because he's not doing the things that he sought to do, so he quits. And when he tells his mom he quits and tells her, he says, I just never had that opportunity to be a ninja. She, of course, becomes enraged, takes him there. It's like, well, this isn't okay. And the master asks the little boy, well, did you meditate? And he says, well, I sat there. He said, but did you meditate? And the little boy takes a second before he realizes that he didn't actually do it.
Right.
It was explained to him that is the most important step. That every person in the room doing the kicks, the flips, all once had to sit on the ground there too. And before you know how to respond, you need to quiet the storm that lives within you. So learning that ability to quiet that storm within you is the first step of being a ninja.
Yeah.
There is no other step unless you've completed this one. So after the little boy got this explained to him, the master said, did you want to be a ninja? He said, I do. So then the little boy was finally able to go and sit on the mat and learn the skill of having that emotional awareness that lives inside of him, to quiet that storm, to know when to respond, to have that ability to think before action, learning how to not feel the importance of believing everything that happens in the room.
Right.
And in that, you become powerful, right? That is power. True power lies in that ability in order to not need to respond to everything.
Right.
And I think that story to me, also shout out to Dave for that story. I think that story to me has resonated and taken place in almost every season of my life in getting clean.
Got it. Yeah. No, I love that story. I love it. And I mean, speaking for myself, I always wanted to be a ninja. So,
yeah.
I
Me too.
I need to get back on the mat.
Me too.
But yeah, no, that's so cool because I think, that's such a powerful statement. And the story itself just shows you, where we get lost and how simple it is to kind of find where we need to go.
Yeah. And I really love this idea of longing. Desire and longing, because we can look at something and we can see a picture of something and we can say that we want that.
Right.
But really not recognizing all of the steps that it's going to take in order to get there,
Right.
and asking ourselves in those steps if we're willing to do that action.
Right.
So we can see somebody that is in recovery 20 years, has a wife, a kids, you know, has the whole house and money and success, and we can say, oh, we want that.
Right.
But are you willing to do the steps in order to get there?
Right. And I think that's so powerful as far as having somebody that you can look up to, or having this ideal, but then also, you know, having that mentorship or having the support system where you realize that, okay, these are the steps that I need to take. And then knowing that you don't have to take those steps by yourself, that there's people who can help you along the way and
Yes.
accept that help. So, Lorin, I really appreciated you coming on the show. I feel like we learned a lot. I feel like, you know, whoever's watching is going to get a lot out of just listening to you and kind of absorbing your energy. You know, if anyone has any other questions, or, you know, they can leave comments, you know, Lorin will be happy to, or will be happy to respond to those. Ultimately, you know, we've really appreciated having you in the program. The clients appreciate everything you do. And, you know, thanks for coming out.
Thank you so much.
All right.